I knew trouble had arrived the moment she said it. "You've got 30 days to relocate your livestock situation or we'll have you forcibly removed." That was the hook. That was the moment everything changed. I was standing on the old wooden porch of my grandfather's ranch, the same boards he'd walked across since 1952, still holding the warmth of the Texas sun. The morning smelled like cattle, fresh-cut hay, and clean earth. Honest smells, real smells, but all of it was drowned out by the sickly sweet cloud of industrial-strength vanilla rolling off the woman standing in front of me. Karen Whitfield. Clipboard clutched to her chest like she was holding the Constitution. Bleached hair sprayed so stiff the Texas wind couldn't move a single strand. Lipstick bright enough to scare livestock. Tone sharp enough to slice barbed wire. She'd lived here all of 6 months. I stared at her boots, sinking into my dirt road, like the land itself was trying to spit her out. She didn't notice. She was too busy tilting her chin up at me like she was judging a school project that didn't meet her high standards. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice calm because I knew she wanted me to lose it. "You realize this is my private property, right?" Her laugh sounded like it could curdle milk. "Not for long, sweetie." Sweetie, that was my first clue this wasn't just a misunderstanding. She looked past me at the fields, at the cattle, at the barn my grandfather built with his own hands. Then she made a face like the entire ranch had personally offended her. "Your decreasing property values," she said, waving her clipboard in a little circle. "The smell, the noise, the aesthetic impact." Aesthetic impact. On a ranch in Texas. I wanted to ask which part offended her, the cows, the grass, or the sky, but I knew better than to feed her fire. What she didn't know was this. She just picked a fight with the man who spent 15 years in Washington, D.C. writing federal HOA regulations. But let me take you back to how all this started. My name is Garrett Stone, born and raised Texas, though I left for D.C. right after college. For 15 years, I fought bureaucratic battles, sat through congressional hearings, and drank more burnt government coffee than I care to remember. My job? Writing the housing regulations HOAs across America must follow. I didn't plan on coming back to Cedar Falls. But when Grandpa Joe passed, he left me the Lazy G Ranch. 40 acres of open sky and quiet mornings. Land older than most of the houses in the new development next door. Land with mineral rights developers had been salivating over for decades. I traded my cubicle for a porch swing. Traded subway train brakes for meadowlark singing. Traded DC noise for Texas sunrise. 6 months in, I thought I'd finally found peace. Then Karen arrived. She bought an $850,000 McMansion in the new subdivision beside my ranch, Whispering Oaks Estates. They had fancy street lamps, strict mailbox designs, and lawn rules longer than the Bible. Within a month of moving in, she'd taken over the HOA, like a general seizing a fort. The first violation letter came taped to my door 3 months after I moved in. "Your cattle are creating agricultural nuisances." Agricultural nuisances. On a ranch. At first, I laughed. Thought it was a mix-up. Thought maybe she didn't understand rural Texas. So I invited her for sweet tea on the porch. That was my first mistake. She arrived with her cousin Dale, the most nervous county code enforcement officer I've ever seen, both armed with cameras like paparazzi for livestock. They took pictures of everything. My manure pile, my chickens, even my grandfather's old tractor that hadn't moved in 5 years. 2 days later, things escalated fast. A manila envelope appeared on my door. Cease and desist. Stop all agricultural activity. Evacuate livestock. Attend emergency compliance hearing. All written on official-looking letterhead that turned out to be printed from her kitchen table. The hearing was held at the Whispering Oaks Country Club, in a room that smelled like floor cleaner, trying to hide the scent of old carpet. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and 12 HOA board members sat behind a long mahogany table like judges in a bad courtroom TV show. A single metal folding chair waited for me. Of course. Karen stood at the head of the table, navy blazer, perfect posture, fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. She launched into a PowerPoint titled Agricultural Threats to Community Standards. Every picture was designed to make my ranch look like a crime scene. The manure pile became a biohazard. My chickens became disease carriers. My barn became an eyesore. When she finished, she folded her arms and leaned toward me. "Mr. Stone, you must comply with HOA regulations." I leaned back in that cold metal chair and spoke calmly. "Ma'am, could you show me these regulations?" Her smile snapped. Her fingers twitched on the clipboard. Board members shifted nervously. "The documents are under legal review and not available to the public," she said. Public? This was my land. So I reached into my pocket and slid a card across the table. My old Federal ID HUD Senior Policy Advisor. Housing Regulations Division. The room went silent. Karen stopped blinking. A woman on the board actually gasped. "Karen," one board member whispered, "you said he was just a local rancher." That was when I knew Karen hadn't just made a mistake. She was running a plan, a big one, a dangerous one. And she'd just poked the wrong bear. Karen must have realized she'd stepped in something deeper than my cattle pasture, because the very next morning the harassment didn't just continue, it evolved. It got louder, bigger, and messier, like she'd woken up determined to prove she could out-crazy the entire state of Texas. And I thought the PowerPoint was bad. Monday started with the rumble of a county code enforcement truck rolling up my gravel driveway. Dale, Karen's cousin, stepped out looking like a man walking into his own execution. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair looked like it had lost a fight with a leaf blower, and he gripped a clipboard so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Mornin', Garrett," he said, avoiding my eyes. "What violation is it this time?" I asked, sipping my coffee. He swallowed. Hard. Unpermitted agricultural structures. I looked out at the barns and sheds my grandfather built in the 50s, every one of them weathered by sun, storms, and 3 generations of stones. "These?" I asked. He nodded, sweating. "Dale, they were here before you were born." He sighed. "I know," but Karen filed a stack of complaints. The stack looked thick enough to level a small tree. Before lunch, 2 trucks from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality showed up. A tired-looking inspector stepped out, wiping sweat from his forehead as the heat clung to him. "Got an anonymous report," he said, already annoyed. "Groundwater contamination." He spent 4 hours testing everything: pond water, soil, troughs. Charlie, my old dog, followed him like he expected treats. Results? Clean. Cleaner than most city tap water. By Tuesday, the state agriculture department arrived about supposed diseased livestock. The veterinarian, Dr. Martinez, examined my cattle. She was all business. Dark ponytail, sharp eyes, no patience for nonsense. After 5 minutes, she looked at me with a raised brow. "These animals are in perfect condition," she said. "Whoever filed this complaint knows nothing about livestock." I didn't need to guess who filed it. By Wednesday, the truck fumes alone made my ranch smell like a highway rest stop. Karen wasn't trying to prove violations. She was trying to bury me under paperwork and inspections until I gave up. But she forgot one thing. I literally wrote the rules she was trying to use. That afternoon, Beverly Chen, the quiet school teacher from the HOA board, pulled into my driveway in her little Honda Civic like a bat out of hell. Dust flew up behind her like she was dragging a tornado. She climbed out clutching a folder, her hand shaking so much her keys clattered to the ground. "Mr. Stone," she whispered, voice trembling. I can't sleep. I'm part of the board and I didn't know. I didn't know what she was doing." Charlie walked over and leaned against her leg, sensing her fear. She smiled weakly at him, then handed me the folder. "Please look at this," quote. Inside was a paper trail so incriminating it made me sit down hard on the porch step. Text messages, emails, screenshots, bank statements, all showing the same thing. Karen wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was trying to force me off my land for a developer. Sunset Holdings, the group building that fancy subdivision, had been feeding her inside info for months. They promised her a $50,000 finder's fee if she got my land sold, plus first pick of the premium lots. It wasn't about manure or noise or chickens. It was about money and greed and my grandfather's land sitting right where their expansion plans wanted to go. Then Beverly handed me something that nearly made me laugh out loud. Look at the HOA formation documents she never wanted you to see. I scanned them. My jaw dropped. Beverly, I said slowly, these are illegal. She blinked. Illegal how? Your HOA doesn't exist. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean, it was never legally formed. No state filings, no county filings, no signatures, no incorporation. Karen's been running a fake HOA. She has the same legal authority as my cows. Silence fell heavy between us as the cicadas buzzed in the trees. Then Beverly's face crumpled. Oh my God, she whispered. We've been threatening people, collecting dues, enforcing violations, and none of it was real. I put a hand on her shoulder. You didn't know. Karen did. We sat there for a moment, listening to the low hum of cattle and the wind rustling through mesquite trees. Then Beverly looked up at me with something hard and determined in her eyes. There's something else, she said, pulling out a final folder. Karen did this before, in other counties. Families lost their land. 20 years in D.C. had hardened me to a lot of things, but this made my blood cold. How many? I asked. At least 6 families. Maybe more. She swallowed. They didn't have your resources, or your knowledge, or your connections. I stood, calm, focused, a storm rolling in slow. Beverly, I said, thank you for bringing this. You did the right thing. Now it's my turn. Quote. That night, I pulled out my old HUD contacts list, the one I never thought I'd need again, and started dialing numbers. Fair Housing, Real Estate Commission, State Attorney General, Financial Crimes Division. And then, one more. Someone I knew would take this personally. When I hung up, the crickets outside were singing. The stars were bright over the ranch, and I felt something I hadn't felt since my federal days. Purpose. Karen thought she was playing a game. She had no idea she'd triggered a federal investigation with her own 2 hands. She had no idea the rancher she targeted once regulated every HOA in the country. And she definitely had no idea what was coming next. Karen must have felt the walls closing in, because the next thing she did wasn't bold. It was insane. The kind of insane that makes you stand there, wondering if you're awake or stuck in some bad TV show. Because Monday morning, just after sunrise, a black SUV rolled up my driveway, followed by a white van with magnetic government seals slapped on the side. 2 federal agents stepped out, except I worked with federal agents for 15 years. These 2? They looked like they got their training from YouTube tutorials and crime podcasts. The man wore a wrinkled suit and sunglasses even though the sun wasn't fully up. The woman stood stiff as a mailbox post, badge crooked, hair frizzing in the humidity. They carried a folder with an official-looking seal, but the paper smelled like warm printer ink. Mr. Stone, the man announced, reading from a script, your ranch is being shut down under the Federal Health Protection Act. I stared at him for a long second. There is no Federal Health Protection Act, I said. He blinked. Twice. The woman jumped in. Well, it's new. Really, I said, stepping closer. Which agency enacted it? Quote. She froze like a deer on a highway. The man coughed. Sir, you have 24 hours to evacuate your livestock. Their voices shook. Sweat dripped. They kept glancing at their car like it was their escape hatch. Behind me, my security cameras recorded everything. Every badge, every fake seal, every trembling lie. But these 2 weren't the only ones watching. Real federal agents, the ones I actually called, were parked discreetly down the road documenting the entire circus. I smiled politely. Well then, Let me call my old coworkers at HUD and EPA so we can coordinate properly." The fake mail agent almost dropped his folder. "No need. We will return to headquarters." They practically sprinted to the SUV, peeling out so fast they threw dust into the air like a tornado. And 20 minutes later, Karen posted about it on Facebook. Breaking: Federal agents have shut down the Stone Ranch. Our community is finally safe thanks to my leadership. She even included photos of the fake agents walking toward my porch. Proof she had staged the whole thing. But her downfall was still coming. And she didn't even see it. By 3 p.m., she crossed a line she could never uncross. She marched onto my property with her cousin Dale and 2 men in hoodies, claiming they were there to assist federal operations. They opened my cattle gate and started discussing how to, quote, to move the livestock. Quote, "They weren't helping anyone. They were trying to steal my cattle." That's when 3 sheriff cars came rolling down the driveway, dust clouds billowing behind them. Sheriff Morrison stepped out, hand on his belt, jaw tight with annoyance. He'd received an anonymous tip from one of the federal agents, watching everything. "Karen Whitfield," the sheriff said, voice heavy as iron, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, livestock theft, impersonating federal officers, and filing false police reports." Karen froze, mouth open. Her voice came out in a squeak. "You can't arrest me. I'm working with federal authorities." The sheriff shook his head. "No, ma'am. You hired actors." The cuffs clicked around her wrists. The sound was pure justice. But the story wasn't over, not by a long shot. The town hall reckoning. 2 nights later, Karen, miraculously out on bond, called a town hall meeting at the Cedar Falls Community Center. She thought she'd charm the crowd, spin her story, regain control. The room smelled like strong coffee, cleaning spray, and tension thick as smoke. Folding chairs filled the place, neighbors whispering, reporters adjusting cameras, air buzzed with expectation. Karen strutted to the stage in a Navy suit, acting like a hero returning from war. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I'm proud to announce that federal authorities have officially recognized the threat from Mr. Stone's ranch." She clicked her PowerPoint remote. The screen lit up with a slide titled, "Federal Intervention, Community Saved." People murmured, confused. Then Beverly stood up, calm, steady, hands clasped in front of her. "Karen," she said, voice carrying across the room, "why were you arrested for fraud yesterday?" Silence. Karen's jaw twitched. That was a misunderstanding. "And the $127,000 missing from community funds?" Beverly asked. Gasps rippled across the room. Karen's eyes darted like a trapped animal. "Those were community expenses." Then I stood up in the back. The entire room turned. I walked to the front slowly, boots echoing on the tile floor, the projector light hitting my shoulders. Karen backed up like the microphone was poisonous. I tapped the laptop. The slide changed. Bank statements, text messages, emails, recordings, photos of Karen vandalizing my fence, proof of fake agents, everything. "Folks," I said, voice steady, "this woman didn't protect your neighborhood. She targeted rural families across Texas. She works with developers. For money. She's stolen land, threatened people, and built a fake HOA to do it." The room erupted. Shouts, disbelief, anger. Then a voice rose above it all. "Karen Whitfield," a woman called out. It was Special Agent Martinez from the FBI. She held up her badge. "You are under arrest for federal housing fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, and operating a criminal enterprise." Karen screamed as she was handcuffed again, insisting I had framed her, insisting she was the real victim. But no one listened. Neighbors who once followed her with fear now watched her with cold clarity. She was done. Finished. Exposed. Over. 6 months later. I sit on my porch now, drinking morning coffee as the sun rises over my grandfather's land. The cattle move slowly across the pasture, dew shimmering on the grass. The air smells like sage, warm earth, and honest work. Karen? 15 to 20 years in federal prison. The fraudulent HOA? Gone. The town? Healed. And me? I turned my lawsuit settlement into a foundation that protects rural families from corrupt HOAs. We've helped dozens already. And every time we stop another Karen, I feel Grandpa Joe smiling somewhere. This ranch will stay in the Stone family forever. No developer will lay a finger on it. And if another HOA bully comes sniffing around, well, they can take a number, because I helped write the rulebook, and I'm not scared to use it.